Hey everybody, thanks for joining my live stream. Full disclosure, this is only the second time I've done a live stream, so excuse me if I make any technical errors. But I'm really excited about tonight because I have a good friend of mine, another fellow realtor, Matt Merton. He's going to come on and join me, and we're going to discuss what everybody asks us every day. What's happening in the market? Where do you see the market going in the future? What are different buyer strategies and kind of the trends that we see happening? So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Matt.
Hello. Hey, hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Let me see, do we like that or do we like that?
6 of one, half dozen of another.
All right, well, I might go back and forth.
Okay.
So let's just, first of all, I want to know how you're doing. I mean, we both work in Maryland, D.C. I know you also do Virginia. The market is crazy. Everybody knows that. Everybody talks about a seller's market. But what's happening with you specifically? What's happening with you in your market?
I mean, my market has been, it's this challenge of making sure that we're getting our buyers lined up to write offers versus just messing around and looking at houses and then trying to convince our sellers that this market will take control and that they need to kind of have faith in that if they price their homes right, and they still have to do all the prep work, but if they prepare the houses and price them right, they're going to see amazing things when it comes to contract time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so funny because people think, even though it's such a strong seller's market, you can just throw a house on the market, put a sign in front of it, and you're going to get 20 offers. I don't think that at all. I think that as realtors, it's our job to get these houses like move-in ready and as pristine as if this were a normal market. And then you'll get the payoff. Then the sellers, will get the multiple offers. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, so as you know, I like spreadsheets. And so I'm tracking zip codes. And when you look at a zip code and look at how days on market affects their final price, that's where you're really starting to see it. So if you look at a house in DC, Maryland, or Virginia that sells in the first 5 days, those homes are seeing 10 to the highest is like 23% over their asking price. And then the minute it hits 7 days, those numbers start to trickle down. And then once you get to 14 days, you start to see those numbers go into the 98, 97 percentile. So if you're not doing the prep and then you're overpricing it, they aren't selling, and then it blows the whole thing up. But if you're pricing it right and you're making them look like show houses, it's off to the races when you put the sign in the front yard.
I know it's really crazy. I mean, it's very exciting. It's exciting I know you and I both work with both buyers and sellers. It's kind of devastating for buyers. I mean, it's a very tough market. And I tell my buyers, I say, this is not for the faint of heart. You're going to get your house. You're going to end up in the house you're meant to be in, but we got to keep going. You got to be tenacious. You got to be strong. You got to listen to me, with different strategies. It's tough out there. Let me ask you a question based on what you just said. When you see those houses staying on for 7 days, which is pretty rare, what's the main reason? Do you think it's overpriced or you think it's condition?
I think it's overpriced. I think that, the buyer's mentality. Okay. So you're on this side of the screen talking about how crazy it is out there. I'm on this side of the screen talking about how crazy it is out there. Every agent in this market, the newspaper, the TV, is everyone talking about this bubble and the prices are just blowing up, and they're seeing on their friends' social media that their house got $100,000 over asking and yada, yada. Right. So when they start and they go into it, they walk into the house, and I don't know one of our strategies is we back down that 10% out of their budget. So if they're looking up to 500, they're really looking to 450. And so we don't want to show them something that's just going to be escalate completely out of hopes. So if you overprice it, so let's say that house is listed at 500 and it should be a 475. That buyer whose agent's telling them not to look at anything over 450 is never going to see the house. So they go on at 500, they sit there for 2 weeks, they drop down to 485, and then people come in and they may get multiples at that point. But I'd say the margin of error in pricing right now, sub $1 million is $25,000 swing either direction, and over $1 million, $50,000 to $75,000 really makes a difference. Where, Caryn, 2 years ago, if something was $75,000 overpriced, you would just throw them an offer and find the middle point.
Right. Yeah. It's true. I mean, I have sellers that were about to go on the market in the next couple of weeks, and a house just went under contract on their street and it went way over, right? So let's, for example, I'm not going to tell the specific details. For example, let's say that house was listed at 800,000 and it went over to 900,000. My sellers are now like, well, why don't we just list it at 900,000? And I'm like, because you can't do that. You still have to put it on the market at the value that we think it should be, regardless of what happened down the street. And then if it escalates, it does, and they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, you can't jump to the higher number. Buyers won't go for it. In my experience, buyers they don't want to be taken for a fool. They'll bid it up if they want it, but they don't want you to tell them how much they should pay over what they normally should have. Don't you agree?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a little bit of the game. Okay. And this game has been going on in Capitol Hill since you and I've been doing real estate. Okay. Capitol Hill is infamous for being $100,000 underpriced on every single property. Everything's going up with 12 offers, that type of thing. So it's this herd mentality of if one person wants it, everybody wants it. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you get this. I don't know if you remember when people would say, well, do you have any offers? And let's talk about the market 4 years ago. Do we have any offers? And you would say, no, write an offer. And they would say, let me know if somebody else wants to write an offer. And you're like, well, that's the worst negotiating tactic I've ever heard of. Like, you want to be the only one on the table. So you're right. Your client who says, well, that one sold for 9, let's go at 9. The buyers aren't thinking that the market's moving up in prices. So listing right near the last comp is the smart play, even if the last comp escalated. So we just listed one downtown, and the one around the corner listed for $935 back in January. They had 12 offers. It went up to $1,125,000. And that's crazy. That blows my 10%, out the window. So we went on at $975.
Okay.
Could we have listed $1,000,001? Yes, but we wouldn't have gotten the traffic that we got. And without the traffic, you don't get the multiples. And without the multiples, you don't get the push over that possibly appraisable limit.
Mm-hmm. Is that the one you just closed?
No, it's the one we just ratified last night. But we had 8 pre-inspections, which is insane, right? It's like that house went to the doctor more than any house in the world. And then we ended up with 7 offers that were all clean.
Yeah, I know. That's what's happening with me. So let's talk. You mentioned pre-inspections. So this not only is live, but it gets recorded and then people are going to look at it later. And I know that another question that people always ask me, especially when they're really ready to look, is like, what are we going to do? What are the buyer strategies? Like, what's going to make us stand out rather than just offering incredible amounts of money? Because obviously if you're paying cash and you're willing to go way over, well, you can't compete with that. But that's just one buyer, and now they're out of the market. So now what about the rest of them? So obviously pre-inspections are a big thing, because for people out there that are going to watch this, pre-inspection means that you're going to do the inspection before you write the offer. So that way, when you write the offer, you don't have any inspection contingency, so it's clean. And hopefully you're pre-approved enough so you don't have a loan contingency, so you can go in pretty clean to the seller, and it's going to make your offer as strong as every other offer, and then it's just going to be down to price. What other buyer strategies are you seeing, or are you working with your buyers?
So the one strategy that doesn't work is an offer deadline.
Oh, I know.
I had 3 of them thrown at me this weekend.
It's the worst.
And when the agent says, let's put a deadline on it, and then we call them back and say, hey, thank you, but we're still going to stick to our deadline. We're the sellers, our deadline. Right.
Just to clarify, you mean that when the buyers put a deadline, not the sellers, but the buyers. Yeah.
They call it, another agent called it an exploding offer, like a time bomb, right? Like, here's my offer. I want a response in the next 3 hours or the next day. And my sellers said it to me. They're like, does that mean they're not going to write an offer for Tuesday?
Right.
And the minute after I said to the buyer's agent, thank you, no thank you, he said, okay, we'll come tomorrow and pre-inspect the house. And I was like, so once again, as you know, we don't sleep during spring market. We do most of our business between 8:30 and 10 o'clock at night. And everybody's stressed out from the day's activities, and kids are screaming in the background, and you're trying to discuss, $1 million transactions with people. So what does work? I think I always say an educated buyer is the best buyer. And that's what started us on tracking the percentage over asking that houses were getting in different neighborhoods and different zip codes. And because I'm sure you get this question, which is like, well, how much over asking should I go? And when you stand there and go, well, I don't know, it doesn't work as well. If you can go and say, okay, historically in this neighborhood, in this zip code, the last 90 days, here's what's happened, or the last 30 days, here's what has happened. Because remember, when the house on 101 Jones Street sells and they have 6 offers and 106 Jones Street comes on the market, there's 5 people who are still looking for that house.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're competing with a lot of the same people over and over again until everybody gets houses. And with the way inventory is going, it's not going to be for a while.
I know. I mean, speaking of a while, like that's the other question I guess is like, how much longer can this go on? Like it can't keep going. Like you watch the news, go online, you go on YouTube, you go anywhere. It's all like the bubble, it's going to burst. It's going to burst. Is this bubble going to burst? I don't think it's going to burst anytime soon, if at all. What do you think?
Well, I'll throw it back to you. Do you think the bubble ever burst really in DC?
I do. In 2008, yeah.
Okay.
2008, which was very different because it was based on I call them fake loans. They were loans, but they weren't based on real information.
Loans,
right. I think everybody suffered. I think DC probably suffered less than other parts of the world, but everyone still suffered. There were foreclosures everywhere. It was short sales. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. I've been doing this 18 years. I think you've been doing it almost as long. You're a little younger than I am.
But I dye my hair gray, so that's okay.
Right.
But I mean, think about this. So, because as we know, YouTube and the press loves a good story, right? And they love it's all going to blow up. We've had 3 hiccups in the last 16 years. We've had the slowdown in 2006, which was the end of the Clinton era boom. Okay, so that's when that was actually, I started in 2005, and the agent I held my first open house for said, "Oh, the weekend market's gone." Then we had 2008 and AIG. Okay, and that was when that's when the too big to fail happened, right?
Right.
And they had to bail out the banks, and that hurt the upper end of the market a lot because they weren't lending jumbo money, and we saw the short sales happening and the foreclosures start to happen. That's probably the biggest bust, and that really that was interesting because it really did affect the lower end, but it also affected a lot of the upper end who took really risky loans.
Yeah.
And then we had 11. And 11 was like the first governmental slowdown. And that's when we had the sequester. But in all of these, nothing has gone to the point where like it just stopped. It just corrected a little bit. It was like a market correction. Like 6 neighborhoods corrected about $50,000 to $75,000, which I don't have $50,000.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
So?
I'm going to disagree with you because I know that when I bought the house I live in now at the end of 2005, literally December 2000, so 2006, a year later, or a year and a half later, in 2008 started, my house went down $100,000 in value. To me, like Lehman Brothers closed and the market collapsed. I feel like there was a drastic collapse. Did I keep working and selling houses? Sure. But I felt a drastic change. It's kind of like recently with the pandemic when everything shut down, I felt like all the lights went off and everything stopped.
Yeah.
I felt that in 2008. I really did. And I felt it with my clients. I felt it with my own home value. I mean, I felt a drastic change. The 2006 slowdown, 2011, not so much. It's just little organic stuff that happened. And, we just adjust. And you're right. I think we're in a very isolated part of the world, but being in DC and right outside of DC in Northern Virginia or in Montgomery County, where we don't get affected as much as other parts of the country, for sure. I mean, that I agree with you, but I still think it was very different then. And I was probably more, and you and I talk a lot about this, I would say about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I was leaning more towards there's no way this market can be sustainable because it's based on a pandemic. Like there's no way. There are people that are furloughed, so they're not counted unemployed. So those numbers are wrong. There's people that are on forbearance, so they're not paying their mortgage. So those numbers aren't accurate. Like there's 2.5 million people still on forbearance. They keep extending it. They keep extending the moratorium on foreclosures. And they keep extending everything. And now Biden's coming with his plan. That's a lot of stuff I just said. but the bottom line is, like 6-8 months ago, I was one of those people who was like, this isn't going to last. Mm-hmm. Now, 6-8 months later, I don't feel the same way, because I feel like the government will bring in some safety measures to help offset the unemployment that's happening and going to happen more when people stop being, when they count all the numbers.
Right.
And when people get off of forbearance, and if they can't afford to keep their houses, then I think that the lenders are going to work with them. They're coming out possibly with a 40-year mortgage. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, well, it's not approved yet, but a 40 years. So they would literally put all these payments at the end and extend the mortgage and just redo the loan. And if that happens, a lot of people are going to be saved. Or if they do have to sell, at least they'll have a lot of equity in their house, as opposed to 2008 when they were 100% financed and then underwater because their house price dropped.
Well, I think that's the main difference. So you're saying you bought into six. I bought in middle of 4. Okay, so basically anything I made in 6 drained out in 7. So it wasn't as impactful on my end. And like you said, you and I didn't stop working. We were still selling houses, still listing houses. And then also there's that where it bounced first. I mean, DC Northwest was the first place to stand back up. And then it radiated out from town. And then, I mean, think about it. It took Germantown, which is way past you, till I'm not sure if they ever got their values back.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm in Potomac, and I would say our values came back only like a couple years ago. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Honestly, I think it took about 10 years.
But the pandemic,
Well, this is put in a whole other stratosphere. But I'm talking pre-pandemic.
But I mean, the pandemic was the best thing for Potomac. If there's anything good that came out of the pandemic, it is that those big houses with lots of space and lots of yard started going back up. I mean, there's, multiples on $3 million houses on acreage now.
I mean, it's a crazy thing. I mean, I don't always only work in Potomac. I'm in Bethesda and in DC too. But, my house, when I would come out here to Potomac and Rockville and North Potomac, it was a totally different market than when I was selling in Bethesda and Chevy Chase in DC. I mean, it was like night and day. And since the pandemic and the trend started to come out, and they wanted backyards and outdoor space and not sharing elevators and not sharing common areas, it's totally turned around. And now the house prices in my neighborhood and my surrounding neighborhoods have spiked. I mean, new price points, like way, way, way high. I don't know if it's going to last. I don't know if this trend's going to last. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, it's and this, as you're talking, and I'm thinking, and I'm I think it's great, because it was starting to feel even 2 years ago like Potomac was not going to bounce back. I mean, I'm not trying to say, but it was, because you're right.
Easy now.
Well,
Potomac, Rockville, North Potomac, I got your back, people.
Okay, yes. But, I'm down county. So I'm Bethesda, Chevy Chase, DC. And I don't go up into Potomac that often. And that's when I call you and you tell me where I'm going wrong. I think the trend, people were paring down and trying to fit into smaller spaces and trying to get more of that urban vibe and get around city centers and all that type of thing. And if you look at, what we haven't talked about is the fact that while the housing market, single family townhouse market is insane, the condominium market is like in the Stone Ages. And
you think the townhouse market is insane too? I don't think it's on the same level as single family.
It's not on the same level, but it is. I mean, it's still, think about downtown Crown, and you think about like Parklands, which was like just new developments, and now people are going into multiples for that. It's space, and it's having a real home office or 4th or 5th bedroom, no elevators. you look downtown at the condominium, and you look even into the county in the condominium world, and it's kind of like 30 to 60 days with 2 price reductions. And I don't know, it reminds me of 2011, 2008, where the question was, there wasn't that low price you could list something at that they would just get crazy traffic. And so it's
let me ask you, would you like, as an investor, would you start buying up some condos? I mean, do we think that the trend is going to turn back? I mean, it's DC. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I wonder if now's the time to invest.
I think that if investors were looking for where the play is to invest right now, that's it. And because we were talking before this, we talked about, as we move closer to herd immunity, right? As we get more vaccinations around, more people are going out in public. People are starting to go do the things they used to do. That hesitancy to share elevators is sort of softened. You might even see people shake hands again, which is weird. I had a client.
Does it feel weird?
I just got I had COVID and I just got my second shot, and I had a client like throw her arms around me and hug me today, and it was like the first time that it happened ever, and it took me totally by surprise. But this is where once people get back to that and start talking to people again, I don't know. I mean, I love my mask, but people don't talk to people anymore because they're wearing masks and they're not friendly. It's a city, but I think that you're going to start to see it get better.
It was interesting. I was at a friend of mine's birthday happy hour at another friend's house. And let's say there was 15 of us there. There were only 3 of us that weren't completely double vaccinated yet. We all had just gotten 1 shot, but everyone else had gotten both shots and were 2 weeks out. Right. And I was looking around and they were acting like nothing had ever happened. It was talking in each other's face, arms around each other. And it was so interesting because there were 3 of us with our masks on in the corner, like the mask of shame. But it was so interesting because I thought to myself, I bet we're going to go back to normal eventually. Like, I don't know how long they had been, since they had been vaccinated. But just looking at them, I feel like we're going to go back to normal. And this is all going to be a blurry dream at some point.
It'll be a story for the history books. And our kids will tell their grandkids. And, I agree because Annabelle and I both had COVID on January 1st. And we both were done with COVID by January 15th. And then, of course, we decided to go on our first trip in a year. And we just we drove someplace. We drove down to North Carolina. But knowing that we had a higher, not immune, but a higher level of immunity because of having the antibody, it was, I went from, I don't know about you, but for the last year, when you're in a grocery store, you're always trying to like shimmy behind somebody to get around them so you don't get in their path. That changed. And then we're going to go away from Memorial Day because the kids are getting their second shot, and we'll all 4 be double shot houses.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So my daughter got her first one, right? She gets her second one next week. But so let's get back to real. I know we can
real estate. So once people feel more comfortable being close to other people, then yes, it's going to bounce back. I mean, and what's going to happen is it's going to be the single family homes are going to go from, this is backwards here, from here to, they'll start to even out. Because
you think so? Do you think because it took a long time for the trend. So the trend used to be like when I was growing up, my parents grew up in DC. They moved out to Potomac. They moved out to the suburbs. That was a trend. Everyone moved out. Everyone wanted the house and the yard and the garage. And then over the years, it became the opposite. It was moving in, no cars, Uber, then share cars or whatever they're called, zip cars and bikes. And, the trend was complete opposite.
Right.
And now it's dramatically switched back overnight last March.
Yeah.
So do you think that it's going to stay out here for a while, or do you think it's going to be both? I mean,
so we're talking when you and I first started talking last March when this started, and I told you that my friend told us that we were going to be wearing masks and we were going to be at home till July. We both thought he was insane, right? We're like, no way this is going to go that long. And now we're here, now they're saying, well, and the mask thing is whatever, but wear your mask, hey, wear your mask. Maybe this time next year, they'll be able to lift that, inside restriction on that. So I think why are people moving to further out? They're moving out because they're trying to avoid murdering their kids in smaller spaces?
Well, no, I think they're moving out right now because of the pandemic. I think it's just that outdoor space and the home office and staying at home more and all that stuff. But I'm saying now that they're here and they tell their friends and their friends, do you think they'll stay? Do you think it'll be like, you know what, this is actually kind of better than being crammed in the city and having to, take an Uber everywhere. I can just hop in my car. Like, I wonder if the sociological part of it will catch up to the need that happened just because of the pandemic. Do you know what I'm saying? I guess only time will tell. I mean, I'm just curious.
And I was talking to a client of mine this morning who was down right off North Capitol Street, so on Bates, which is a really, up and coming neighborhood. And he moved to Annapolis at the beginning of the pandemic and did an Airbnb for a month, and realized that with two young boys that having that much space was great. And now they moved to Kensington. Right. There's nothing less hip than Kensington when you come from like a hip DC neighborhood. Like first thing when he moved in, he's like, your takeout food is horrible. And I was like, sorry, it's called a grocery store. We cook out here. Right. And, I said to him today, because one of the row homes I have on the market is a neighbor of his. And he's like, did I sell too soon? I said, no, you sold when you needed to sell. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, you know what? I wouldn't change it because we love being out here. And he now has 2 cars. Imagine that.
Right. But you're saying what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I think I think a portion is going to be that. But remember, we're still like the millennials are a huge generation.
Yeah.
And they held off buying because their older brothers and sisters got really killed in 2006 because they're the ones who bought in 2006 and then 2008 were doing short sales. And if you remember, like a lot of the younger buyers will say, well, I'm not going to do what they did. But they're ready to buy now. And
millennials are probably, I think they at least the news says they're the biggest market that's going to come in the next couple of years. So given that they're obviously younger and we don't know what they're going to want, if things go back to quote unquote normal, which hopefully they will soon. Mm-hmm. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but
I do. It's right over here. Hold on.
If you had to get, because everyone always thinks we do, which,
right. Oh, here it is.
We do make educated guesses. If you had to guess, make an educated guess on what's going to, not this year, because we kind of know nothing's going to happen this year. It's going to be the same. The next 5 years. What do you think? And then I'll tell you mine too, and I'm not going to copy you. I already know what mine is.
Yeah, so next 5 years. So we look back 5 years, what happened? And this is unprecedented. I think that I think we're going to see it's always going to be pro house. Houses are always going to, it's just like you can't recreate land, right? You can put more units on one piece of land.
Okay, wait. So there's 2 parts of this. One is in the next 5 years, what's going to happen with the market, like prices, and the other part is what's going to happen with the trend.
Okay, so the market, after we get through this crazy feverish push, we'll probably do like DC always does and go back to a 3%, 3 to 6, 7% a year appreciation. Okay, that's the way it's been since 11. That's the way it was like in the 80s. That's the way it was in the 90s. No, all these things, right? What's going to happen? Do you think
that's going to be because interest rates are going up? Because it's funny you mentioned the 80s. I read this article that was talking about how it was in the 80s and how prices have gone up. I think it was like 250% or something crazy. Mm-hmm. But interest rates were 10%. So when you take into account interest rates today, it went down to like, and it was in 1989 when the article was. So it was 10%. Yeah. And then I know they were 16 at one point, but this is just 10%. But it was like this whole graph. It was really interesting. I wish I knew how to share my screen because I could show it to you. Send it to you later. But then they took into account the interest rates today, and then they took into account inflation and all these other things. And it turned out that it was basically even. The home values today to 1989. It was really, really interesting. Oh. When you're talking about the next 5 years, are you talking about because interest rates are going to go up, so that's going to slow things down, or people are going to sell because they're going to be healthy again? Like, what are you where are you getting your? I think
I'm pulling it out of just historical what we've seen happen. The thing as I'm talking though, I'm thinking about this. We're not even talking about probably the biggest impact on our market.
What do you mean?
which is the work from home world. You know,
Right.
our business, our warehouse, our factory is the U.S. government, right? Like we don't have a steel mill, we don't have a paper plant, we have a government. And
You're losing me a little bit. What do you mean? Who's we? The realtors or
the
people?
Washington D.C. market.
Okay.
So the Washington D.C. market doesn't, like, you go to Baltimore and their factories. You know, you travel across the country, and when a factory closes, it kills them.
But we've got NIH, we got a lot of stuff going on here.
Which is government,
AstraZeneca. I mean, we got a lot.
But our main business is government, and as they start to minimize staff, I mean, I feel for our partners in the commercial world, because no one needs real estate companies don't need 10,000 square feet for an office anymore. We've always been
commercial world, I think, is going to step, because I think the trend of people working from home is here to stay.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. So like I have clients who work at, a Department of Energy or this type of thing. And they used to, when you got your post in DC, you sold your house in Minnesota, you moved to DC, you bought your house in DC and you worked there. Now they're allowing those people to telecommute.
Right.
So it's going to spread the sort of the population of government workers into different markets that just isn't going to always. So that's going to have an impact. I don't know if it's going to be a huge impact, but that's going to be an impact. I think just in general, things are going to go back to a little bit of normalcy. There will be a big bubble burst if it keeps going at this pace.
Yeah. Well, I think historically bubbles burst when like drastic things happen, when people can't afford their loans or when interest rates suddenly spike up. That's when something drastically happens, like in 2008, you get a burst. Mm-hmm. Here's what I think. I think that the trend of working from home is here to stay. And I don't think it's just because people like it more. I think it's because employers realize it's more cost effective.
Of course. Right.
But I'm saying, I don't think it's people like, well, I just enjoy working from home, so it's here to stay. I think it's coming from the top, but that's what's going to happen. So I think the commercial world, they're going to have a hard time.
Right.
I do think as we get more normal, and just seeing from this little social experiment that I was in with this birthday happy hour, mm-hmm. that sellers obviously are older than the younger buyers, are going to feel more comfortable with people being in their homes, because they don't want people in their homes yet because of the right. pandemic, and they'll realize they have a lot of equity, and they're going to want to get in on the seller game, and they're going to put their house on the market, and they're going to have a place to go, because now they're going to be able to travel again. Maybe they're going to go to a more tax-friendly state than where we live, to Florida or even to Delaware, or any place is more tax-friendly basically mm-hmm. than where we are. And that's going to create more inventory, right? Because we're lacking inventory. That's what's creating this market, is there's not enough houses for buyers to buy. And so they right. bid on one and price goes up. So we got the sellers are going to be more comfortable selling their homes, having people come in their homes, and they can also travel to where they want to retire or move to or downsize. More inventory. I think that interest rates, they're already starting to creep up. 6 months ago, they were in the mid 2s. Now they're in the low 3s. No news report, either on television or on the internet, that I've read has said they're going to drastically spike up. They think that they're going to probably be in the mid 3s by the end of 2021. I asked you 5 years, so I got to go with that. I still think they're going to be relatively low, even in the next 5 years, unless something happens, unless something globally happens. Then I don't know.
But you got to remember that the buyers right now think 0.25% is a drastic spike.
And it is for that. Some of them that are on the cusp and they're bidding up. I mean, I had a buyer that, we had to adjust the price point because interest rates went up from the time we started to the time we got under contract. So it can be a big difference. But the lending world is so tight right now, it's not going to be like before. It's not going to be a drastic implosion of people that have loans that they no longer can pay. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not going to happen because the restrictions are too tight to actually get a loan. Even though they just started to loosen up right before this all happened. And as far as the trend to move back towards urban living, towards the city, towards shared transportation, as opposed to being out here, I don't know. That's the one thing I'm so curious, because it's more like, in my mind, not a real estate question as a humanity question. Like, do we want to be close to other people again after what happened? do we want to share cars with strangers like Uber and ride shares and all this? Or are we now it may take a while after this sticker shock of what happened for us to feel that way. And I don't know if 5 years is enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it depends on how fast GM can turn out their electric vehicles they were talking about, because they're all reason people move this, to get away from gas cars, to get away from, we are still creatures of convenience.
Yeah.
And we've been inconvenienced for a good reason for the last 13 months, right? No one, if you say, do you feel like you were convenienced by being told to stay at home? No one says, yes, that was awesome. Well,
no, my kids might.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. School from home, but
much more convenient for me to wake up, roll out of bed, and turn on my computer to go to school.
Yeah. Can you bring me something? Yeah,
exactly. What time is lunch? But I don't understand. I don't serve lunch. You're in school.
Yeah, I'm not the lunch lady. You don't see a hairnet. Let's go. But for the adults, like, you're right. Employers are like, we're now renting 10,000 square feet. We can now rent 3,000 square feet and put a third of the desks in there, and people will come in 2 days a week, and then we're not paying for heating, cooling, air conditioning, and space for our entire staff. We're telling you it's a luxury. You get to work from home. You and I both know we worked from home before the pandemic, because that's how realtors work. There's pros and there's cons to it. The personal interaction, like not seeing other people in the office, does take something away from worker morale, the ability to work as a team on things, and really feel like, and so we were both small business people. We have different approaches to the business, but I have a couple of people who work for me, and not seeing them every day, or knowing that I could know they were working on everything that I want them to, is a little, you have to cope. So we'll see.
I also think it's just general human interaction. I think we need, like, as humans, we need to interact with other people. Like, the whole point of isolation is torture. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's how they torture people. They put them in a cell by themselves.
Right.
So yeah, I get that. As far as being around our colleagues and our teams and everything else, it's definitely different.
Yeah. So I think that culturally, will we go back? I mean, we are pack people. Speaking of which, there's one of my dogs.
I just heard the TV.
Dogs are pack animals. People are meant to be together. So eventually, people will, I think, move back to wanting to do things together. Like you said, your birthday party, scenario was one of them. If you go to any other state than one we live in, because I just did that crazy car ride around to colleges. And like in Kentucky, no one has masks on, and everyone's just eating in restaurants. And Tennessee, it's the same. And so in markets that we aren't into, they are going back to normal. So I think it will. Does that mean that Potomac loses, or further out loses its benefit that it has now? No, because I think it's taught a whole bunch of people that there is benefit to it.
And they're not going to be commuting as much too if they're going to work at home. So that's a big thing with moving in was about the commute, and that's also going to be mitigated. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's interesting. I mean, so I think like the takeaway. And by the way, thank you so much for coming on the stream. I told you, it's only my second time doing this, so I appreciate it. I don't even know how to do the comments or the questions yet, because I did before, and then I don't know where it went. I was trying to figure out while we were here. So next time I'll do that. People, if you were trying to ask a question, I'm very sorry. I figured it out before, and I just can't figure it out right now. But I do appreciate you coming on. I think the takeaways are, we don't think there's going to be a bubble that's going to burst. Yeah. We both think that this seller market is going to continue for the foreseeable future, but will hopefully slow down, in my opinion, not for at least another year. Is what I think. I think like I said, as interest rates tick up a little bit and people get more comfortable, people coming in their houses to sell them, more inventory will come and it will slow it down. I don't see that happening until things really go back to normal. And I think my prediction, and who am I, but my prediction is going to take at least another year. I think we're looking into 2022, 2023. So for at least a good year, it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing we talked about is some buyer strategies. I heard a good one the other day. Somebody said, and it's a very tiny thing, but sometimes it comes down to the tiny things when all the buyers are competitive. It was an older house, and the buyers bought this home warranty, which will convey to them for the year, but they started it right away. So it covered the sellers for the whole part of the listing until the house gets turned over to them.
Right.
And it's at no cost. I thought that was really clever. It's like, listen, if anything happens while you're in the house, because it's a 2-month contract to close,
right,
we got you covered. We're going to stick a home warranty. You're not going to pay for it. I thought that was really cute. I also had, my buyers, and I don't know how you feel about letters. I know that there's a lot of people that think that there are fair housing violations, and I get that, because fair housing is a serious thing, especially where we are in this part of the world. And if you start talking about personal things, it could create a fair housing violation. You got to be very careful. But at the end of the day, I have had a lot of success. My buyers have had a lot of success with writing letters to the sellers. What about you?
So my advice to buyers who want to write letters, that's fine, but do not send me a letter with your picture on it.
Right.
Because as a listing agent,
right,
I'll open up a PDF and there's 16 pictures of kids and dogs and wedding pictures. And I'm like, then it is a fair housing violation. Like,
I never read a letter. Do you actually read? If they write them, I pass them along. I don't read them. And I actually ask my sellers not to read them until after I've gone through my analysis and we pick one.
Okay. So here's the buyer trick. So I ask my sellers, do you want to hear the letters? And some will say not until after we've picked. Okay. I know of agents at other companies that put the letter on a blank addendum and make it part of the contract, which means they have to read it and they have to sign it. Because if it's on a signed addendum, it now becomes.
How can you make that part of the contract? It doesn't make any sense.
It just, anything you put on an addendum that you have a signature from the buyer,
it's not something you agree on. It's
just the way they do it. It's like, I've also known people who have tried to put lender letters on addendums to try to, because remember, lenders don't have skin in the game, but to try to have recourse against lenders. It's everyone in this business trying to practice law, which they shouldn't do, but that's something I've seen people do.
That's kind of crazy.
Deposits directly to the sellers.
I've seen that.
Non-refundable.
I mean, that's actually not a new trick. I've seen that with new construction a lot, and with when there's been delays in new construction and stuff like that, or there've been delays with contracts. I've seen that in the past.
Right, but this is there. It's actually, these are coming now though with a signed release. Right. So it's coming as 2 separate earnest money checks, one to a title company, one directly to the seller. And
sounds like a bribe.
Kind of is. I mean, but it sounds like,
here's some money if you take my offer. I mean, I'm just saying.
But it's not illegal and it works.
I've heard of this. It hasn't happened in my experience. But have you heard of buyers offering to pay the commission?
Not the commission, but transfer taxes.
Transfer, I've heard too, but I've heard buyers, we were talking in our office meeting, buyers offering to pay the whole commission, so the whole 5 or 6%. So, I mean, that's a great way to help the sellers out of, it's a great way to have the sellers make more money without inflating the price. You don't have to worry about the appraisal. It really is quite clever if you think about, if the buyers have the cash and they don't care.
It is. Though the only thing I would think about, I want to I'd make the buyers talk to their tax accountant before they did that, because those commissions from the seller side discount their gains. On the buyer side, I don't know if the commission could be considered cost of purchase, which then would be part of the tax.
You're getting into a whole other occupation that I do not have to have a license in.
I don't have a license either.
I don't comment on that.
That's what comes to my mind. But no, I think there's, they're all different tricks out there, and that's what they are. They're tricks. But I think when it comes down to it is what you started with, which is serious buyers who listen to your advice, who work with direct lenders that you know and trust, who are willing to take calculated risks, not stupid risks. Mm-hmm. And an agent like you or like me that knows the market and knows the research and will tell them, hey, this is probably not going to appraise by this much, because it's not that hard to figure out. It's not like you're throwing craps every time you call an appraiser. We have comps to look at. but I think that if people go in that way and stay off the rocket mortgages and the .com mortgage world, and because you can't trust what you're reading and you can't trust what you're going to get, and then you end up holding the bag.
And the sellers aren't going to go for it.
And the sellers aren't going to go for it.
I tell my out-of-town buyers, you got to use a local lender because you're in competition. And they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, I don't know this lender. I know this one. So you're going to lose. It's very important.
That local lender is going to pick up the phone on your behalf and call the listing agent, not wait for them to call you. And I just lost a light, so that must mean we're done.
All right. Well, you still look good. We'll wrap it up. I appreciate it. We can do it another time. I asked you for 20. You gave me 45. So I do appreciate it. You're awesome. As you know, I love working with you. Can we do that? Oh, I think it's the other way. All right, dude. I will talk to you later. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. Right. And if anyone needs to find Matt, I'll put his information in the comment section on the YouTube video.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.